Now let's fast forward around 7 years into the future, where Sarah and Chris are now in their mid 30s. Since we've last saw them, they've now managed to buy the family home and also start a family. Their current primary goals in life are wealth accumulation as well as furthering their careers. So here they're going to be setting up for their family's long term financial security. Heading back over to the More platform, we can see that both Sarah and Chris are together now earning around $240,000 in annual income. Individually, that's around $120,000 for Sarah, and again around $120,000 for Chris. This is around a 30% increase on their previous positions. Coming further down over here, you can see that their expenditure position has increased quite significantly as well, again around 30%, largely due to the fact that they now have loan repayments on the family home, as well as additional spending costs for their first child. Just briefly coming over here, we can see that they've entered in a new dependent, which is their child Chelsea, who's now around 2 years old. You can see that their current annual surplus cash flow is sitting at around $44,000, which is a large and healthy increase from their previous position some 7 years ago. However, their total cash savings is only sitting at around $20,000. Coming down below, we can actually see that this is due to the fact that they've started smashing down their loan from the moment that they had the loan when they purchased the property in 2021. And it's now sitting at around $490,000 down from the 540, and now they have approximately available equity of $126,000 with a property value of 775K. Now, let's verify some of the information that we've just looked at. In their current family home, you can see over here the in the historical change log, which is a great way to enter in the values of your home as you're tracking it over time. They started at $620,000 in 2021, and it's now sitting at $775,000. Because they've tracked this over time over the last few years, when they head over to Insights, they can see the gradual performance of the property at the various points in time, with that overall increase of around 25% in total. And you can also see the increases over the various periods of time. For example, over the last year, it's increased to $35,000. Heading back over to the loan, you can also see, again, by looking at the history over here, that the value of the loan has diminished from $540,000 to $493,000 over the last few years, again, showing them aggressively smashing down the value of the loan. Coming over here, we can take a look at their history when it comes to income. You can see that it has increased pretty significantly since the start, sitting at $89,000 initially, and over the course of the last 3 years, it's increased up to $119,000. Which the same can be said for Sarah. Coming over here, we can see the story of her uh, of her job, her income story, from 2017 all the way up until 2024. Finally, coming over to the expenses, we can see that we've now filtered this from the value of highest to lowest. You can see that the childcare fees for Chelsea are currently rating as the top expense. And we can also see some of the changes that were mentioned in the 20 scenario, where the holidays have been reduced from their initial values of large and healthy $17,500 per annum to about $7,000 per annum. So now let's return to Sarah and Chris's next step in their financial journey, which is buying that investment property. So from where we started, we've now got a $775,000 home. We've got a current mortgage of $493,000 and current available equity to invest at 80% of the property value of about $126,000. We've got an annual surplus of around $44,000. So hypothetically, let's look at a pretty comfortable investment property at $500,000 for them. Factoring into account initial stamps of 5%, we're now looking at a $525,000 initial entry cost. With some sample investment property workings, we've got a $20,000 rental income, that's approximately a 4% yield, and two loans here. Firstly, the equity release, which is going to come out of the family home of $125,000, as well as a $400,000 loan, which represent 80% of the value of the purchase price of the first investment property, totaling about $525,000 of lending. So they'll be borrowing fully for this particular property, and then we'll be factoring in 1.5% of expected holding costs annually. So before negative gearing, benefits are included. You can see that the total remaining surplus is anticipated to be around $23,000 per annum, which is still a positive surplus and looking pretty healthy. So, as a quick reminder, let's take a look at why it's beneficial for a person to or a household to buy an investment property as part of their overall family's portfolio. On the left here, we have Sarah and Chris as if they continued on from their situation in their 20s. They're just continuing to save year on year. You can see that the only property asset that they've got is the family home. And by the end of 20 years, they're sitting at a net position of around $4.6 million. Whereas on the right, we've got if they purchase that family home and also the $500,000 investment property, you can see by the end of the 20 years, you've got a net projected variance of around $1 million within 20 years. And that's soon after that's been paid off, which means that particular amount will compound even further into the future with plenty more opportunity to come. Coming back to the More platform, let's take a quick look at whether or not this particular purchase is viable for Sarah and Chris. Now, one of the quick tools that can be used to quickly check some numbers is Money Stretch. As an example, Money Stretch can allow you to project on a short-term basis some changes that you are planning to make to your financial position to see if they will be viable or not. Over here, we've got the net income of their current positions. And if we factor in, let's say, for example, $7,000 increase each, so that's about $14,000, factoring into account about 30% worth of tax, you can see that with these increases in rental income, based on the position that we've seen above, in the red, we could see that that increase in income on its own is obviously going to increase our position over the next few years. However, if we now factor into account the investment property cost that we discussed previously, which was $7,500 per year, and around, let's just call it $34,125 per year, which is the two loans for their lending. You can see the previous position in the black, and then in the red, you could see the position that would be held in their cash flow forecast if they were to potentially purchase this property, with both those increases in income as well as those increases in expenses. So here, Sarah and Chris should theoretically, based on these really rough numbers, be able to purchase that next property. We can go even further as well. If we're going to be looking at potentially having another child, we could see what the impact of reducing Sarah's income can be, let's say at 50% pay for a period of time before returning to full-time work. So this gives us an indication of what it might look like if we had to drop off one of the incomes and how long our existing household cash flow would last without making any sort of changes. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's have a look and see how to use the platform after they've purchased this property. Now, before we do that, we'll take a quick look at wealth speed. Now, wealth speed is essentially an indicator which tells you how fast your household is generating wealth. You can see over here that Sarah and Chris are currently generating wealth at around $15 per hour, which is made up of their asset speed, as an example, which includes their personal property and super as the only sort of investment avenues that they currently have, their current savings, as well as the rate at which they're reducing their debt. Coming across over here as well, you see net income speed of $20 per hour, as well as spending speed of $15 per hour. So we'll go ahead and add in those properties, the property, and then we'll go ahead and see what the effect is on our overall wealth speed and speed projections. Coming over here, we'll go ahead and add in the asset first. And so we'll go ahead and create the property. Here we'll call it first investment property. And let's just put a random address in there for $500,000 as an investment jointly held. And we'll add in those income and expense items that we mentioned earlier. So here we'll have $20,000 per year. And then we'll add in a range of expenses that might come with the property. So goal here is obviously to make it equal $7,500 per annum. So here we're adding a couple more. And here I'm just grabbing some typical values that might arise out of the or some typical expenses that a property investor might incur based on the property that they're holding. For example, management fees, I'm taking 7.7% or 7% of the actual income itself. And finally, we'll put the rest into maintenance. Right. Oh, let's not forget to put the purchase price in over here. And let's not forget to also put a projected capital growth in place as well. Rightio. So now we've got those details in for the first investment property and the income and expenses. Let's go ahead and add in the two loans that we need. So we'll create a couple of standard variable loans. First one being $125,000. And let's not forget to add the purpose of a loan. So this dictates whether or not the loan itself is going to be deductible. We know this $125,000 is going to be secured on the family home. Let's assign some basic interest rates at an interest only value. So that's about $677 per month over a 30-year loan term. We've got an interest only expiry date of about 5 years into the future before it hits P and I. There we go. That's our first loan. And we'll enter in the second loan really quickly. So there we have it. So if before we have a look at the effect of this particular property on the wealth speed, if you remember, we had about $15 per month previously. In addition to that, for the wealth speed, and in addition to that, we had about $20 for the net income speed. So jumping back over here, we can see the change instantly. That 15 has now gone up to 17, which reflects the increase in our investment property value speed, showing how much that's gone to further our net position over time. The subsequent increase in the asset speed, increase in net income speed, saving speed is obviously decreased because we're taking a bunch of our surplus to pay for that new property, and then an increase as well in our spending speed, as obviously we are now taking on an additional expenditure. You will notice that debt reduction speed hasn't actually reduced in this particular case because we're only taking interest only payments to begin with. Coming back over here, we did see earlier that we were forecasting approximately $23,000 of remaining annual surplus post-purchase. So we could see over here in this example, that's actually going to be a little bit higher at around 30,000 because we are taking into account negative gearing benefits here. Rightio. So one final thing we can do as well is we can double check how Sarah and Chris compare to their peers using MoneyFit. This is something they might want to do just to see how they're looking. They might think that they're doing pretty well amongst the people in their age group with one child. Um, this helps them compare themselves and their household to others on the platform. So you can see here they're sort of in the upper middle rung of the household incomes in this particular scale over here. On the expenses, they're sort of in the middle, whereas they're also in the middle for annual surplus cash flow. But with regards to net worth, you can see here there's probably a little bit more work that can be done based on how they compare to people within their age bracket. So, in the middle of their wealth accumulation journey, we've taken a look at a number of tools and how it affects Sarah and Chris's position. So, we've inputted the property and the associated cards using My Financials. We've verified some of the information using MoneyStretch for the new property, and we've compared Sarah and Chris to their peers using MoneyFit.